All right, I think we're all set. So I am Barrett Jensen. I'm the Assistant Solid Waste Manager at Pickens County Landfill. I have been around since about 2013. Started as a gatekeeper doing my waste screening courses just presented by Dave. Worked myself into operations and eventually got my certifications and degrees that gave me the ability to be in the current position that I am. I've learned a lot in this short time that I've been here, and hopefully I can teach you something, or at least keep you up to date and aware of the asbestos that we work with a lot. So Kath, if you could go ahead and we'll go to the next slide. We'll talk about our objectives. All right, there we go. All right, so today we want to learn the difference between friable and non-friable asbestos. Very important difference between the two. And also understand how the long-term exposure to asbestos can harm the human body, how it gets in, and in addition, we want to recognize areas where asbestos may be located on our site. A lot of us, especially in the solid waste industry, a lot of it's the same, but we'll go over those and we'll have an open discussion at the end if anyone has any questions or comments on how they deal with asbestos. In addition, knowing the personal protective equipment that you need to use to protect yourself against asbestos exposure. And then of course safe work practices, more site specific when you need to clean up asbestos on your site, because not all the time does it come in the proper way. So Kathy, go ahead and next slide please. So what is asbestos? Doesn't have anything to do with bacon muffins, but if Kathy can go ahead and go to the next page, we can see the 6 naturally occurring silicate minerals that are indeed asbestos. Each visible fiber is composed of millions of microscopic fibrils that can be released by abrasion and other processes. I don't like the big words, so I like to kind of go by their colors, the blue asbestos, brown asbestos, white asbestos, and green. So with that, I'd like to go into kind of the history of asbestos, which we can see on the next slide. I think, there it is. So asbestos mining has existed for really probably about over 4,000 years, but large-scale mining didn't really begin to the end of the 19th century. That's when manufacturers and builders really began to use asbestos for its desirable physical properties, such as sound absorption, average tensile strength, resistance to fire, heat, electricity, and it's quite affordable. Oftentimes when they use asbestos for its resistance to fire, heat, which is primarily what it's used for, they often mix these fibers with cement or woven into fabrics or mats. They made asbestos very widely used, and they continued to grow throughout most of the 20th century until it really came to be that there was a large health hazard with the use of asbestos dust, and we'll kind of go into more of how that started to become phased out of our industry. Kat, you can go ahead and switch the slide, please. Asbestos, is it still used today? Indeed it is not. Like it says there, in 1989, the U.S. Government instituted a gradual ban on the manufacture of asbestos, but really it began in the early 70s, right about 1973. It was 1989 the EPA issued the final rule, and that was under Section 6 of the Toxic Substances Control Act. But even though it's been many years, we're still seeing it all the time. So if we can go to the next slide, please, we'll talk about friable and non-friable. So there's two categories, friable and non-friable asbestos. We typically, when we talk about asbestos material, we typically mean any material that contains more than 1% of asbestos by weight or volume. Non-friable asbestos is really any material that when dry can't be crumbled or pulverized or really reduced to a powder by hand pressure. And then you can go into the friable, which is the dangerous stuff. We don't take it. We just strictly do non-friable, which is any asbestos material that when dry can be crumbled, pulverized by hand pressure. And that's pretty dangerous stuff. All right, next slide, please, Kathy. All right, where can asbestos be located? We all have a pretty good idea, and I'm going to go ahead and take the easy one out on this. And then the next, you can go ahead and read that if you like. But the next slide will have a video that shows a lot of the normal places where we might find asbestos. Some might be surprising, some you'll know. Kathy, you want to go to the next slide and start that up? And it's about 8 to 10 minutes. We might cut it short so you guys can get back to your normal day. We don't keep it too long. And yes, I realize this is the United Kingdom, but it's quite similar. So originally on this, there was some pretty intense music, so we'll just talk about it instead. So something we see a lot, vinyl floor tiles, pretty common. The linoleum flooring. You know, this video to me, you know, helps break down visually what we're really looking at and how common how common asbestos is in, or really was, in our construction industry. Yeah, we can stop there, Kathy. That's good. We can go over to the next slide. So a lot of that stuff seemed like pretty average stuff you'll see in a construction demolition load. So it's, it's not something that you're necessarily going to see or smell. Hopefully you don't smell it or inhale it, but it's there. So keep that in mind. With all these C&D loads coming in. Asbestos in the body. How does it get in? Obviously, inhalation is by far the most normal route of exposure to asbestos. There are examples of ingestion of asbestos, like through some biotas, like clams, that have been contaminated. There's also been absorption through the skin, and that is possible. But dermal contact is very unusual and typically only leads to calluses or corns. Still no fun, though. I'll go into the next slide, Kathy, please. So asbestos is dangerous. That's why we're here having a presentation on it. We deal with it a lot, especially as like in Pickens County, we last year had 53% construction demolition debris coming into our waste stream. That's a lot of possible asbestos. We do require that companies fill out a special waste form, and they are required to do testing, and abatement companies are required to let us know and fill out all the proper paperwork. But some will definitely make it through the waste stream. So with that, we'll go to the next slide and start talking about long-term exposure. Typically, it takes years of continued exposure to high levels of asbestos to cause health problems. And it's unique, asbestos is. What's unique about it is that people can live years or even decades with the disease before you really start seeing the effects. Some of the big ones are asbestosis, mesothelioma, and if we go to the next slide, Kathy, we can start talking about those. So first, starting with asbestosis, right there you have all your symptoms and a time frame from exposure to manifestation of asbestosis in the body. So asbestos fibers, just like in this picture here, are trapped inside the lungs, which in turn causes the body to react by producing an acid that attempts to rid itself of the fibers. Unfortunately, this acid doesn't affect the asbestos fibers, and instead, over a period of time, it'll cause severe scarring of the lungs. The lungs become really stiff and then begin to thicken because of the scarring, and you begin to lose your ability to have oxygen pass from the lungs and into the blood. So pretty nasty stuff. We don't want anyone in the future coming down with asbestosis. So next one, Kathy, if you could please change it. Perfect. Mesothelioma. Mesothelioma is a cancer of the outside tissue of the lungs. And this cancer is solely linked to exposure to asbestos fiber. Research has been able to determine an exposure level which may be attributed to the onset of this cancer. Therefore, exposure to just one asbestos fiber potentially may result in this development of mesothelioma. Obviously, if you smoke too, you're at a higher risk. I think important for here is keep an eye on these symptoms, and the time frame. All right, and then lung cancer. Lung cancer is probably one of the most common asbestos-related diseases. There are over 3 million deaths a year from lung cancer. Smoking is the #1 cause, obviously, but asbestos exposure is right behind them on #2. Again, if you smoke, you will increase your likelihood of the manifestation of this disease. With the symptoms, you start to cough, blood in your mucus, severe weight loss, and chest infections, and can manifest in anywhere from 15 to 35 years. All right, and we'll jump into the site-specific, Kathy, on the next slide. Personal protective equipment. Us on the working face, we typically are in equipment, but if we have to deal with asbestos, disposable overalls are highly recommended. It makes decontamination easier, and what we use is we have a full body Tyvek if we have to physically work with asbestos. Of course, you need your high efficiency particulate air filters that have been fit tested, your gloves, and your eye protection. For the most part, with Pickens County, we have our non-friable asbestos that comes in that must be double bagged, wetted, and the official paperwork. And it has to be approved by solid waste manager, and we need time to prepare because we have to cover with 18 inches we have to cover with 18 inches of trash over that asbestos. So for us, where on our site why might we be exposed to asbestos? It's the trash. And so with that, with all this being solid waste industry, Kathy, this is where I would like to open it up to an open discussion. What people do, they do it differently, what their permit says, and how they keep their employees safe. All right. Let me unmute you all real quick, and if you have any questions, we can start talking about it. If not, we will move on. All right, so if anyone wants to jump in, go ahead. I do see Miss Richardson put in there in our county homes from the 70s and 80s are getting to the age where remodels and updates are happening more frequently. I found most homeowners don't realize that asbestos is found in drywall texturing. I'm curious how we screen C&D waste for asbestos. Most home demos need a permit, correct? Do I request a copy of the permit from everyone bringing in C&D?
Well, Jennifer, the Pickens County experience is we do not request a copy. So any demo through our community development departments that issue permits, they do require that an asbestos check or test has been done on anything they're demoing. Now that's probably the larger jobs. You might get somebody who's just doing a small room or a bathroom and, again, tearing stuff down unknowingly. We don't require they present a copy of their permit with their asbestos test for every C&D load that comes in. Pickens County, 58% of our waste is construction demolition debris. I do believe South Canyon Landfill, which is down the road from us, they do require that permit. So we will be taking a closer look. But yeah, that video, which I accidentally cut short, I apologize. We can send a link out to that. It really had a good idea. Showed you all the different things that could contain asbestos, and that's kind of where your waste screening comes in. But the reality is probably some is sneaking through.
And that's a fundamental reason why we chose to end grinding our construction demolition debris with air quality asbestos, because you never know. And it's for us, it's at Pickens County, it's not worth putting the public and the employees in danger.